Perfect. All right. Let me know when you can see that, everyone.
I can see it.
Perfect. All right. So we'll kick off. These are there's some overlap with the pre-meeting pack, but also some of the differences we've not coming through that. So let's go. The agenda today, kick off with welcome. Go through some of the usual business, which is what we do at every technical design group meeting. Go through a little bit of the updates, and then do a quick introduction to Spark and overview of our Core project. I wanted to include this because since we kicked off this Core technical design group in, I think, the end of August last year, we've increased membership in the technical design group by about 100 people. And I don't think they've actually seen some of this. So I just want to reset that and provide that introduction to people and go through, especially for those who have only recently joined us, how do we do work as a technical design group? Where do we find things? Where are the spaces and the communication tools we use? And then we're going to go through the proposal for adoption of name to use in AU Core that was put out, I think, about a week ago for review, and Ruben will do that. And then depending on how much time we have left, we'll go through the R1 scope update and what's coming next. So usual business is, as always, starting with approval of minutes of the previous meeting. So I'll actually just navigate to that. So that got sent out for review in December, I think just a couple of days after we had the meeting. I know a couple of people have made edits on this, but as far as I know, there is no outstanding feedback. Speak up if you intend to go through and review this and need more time. Okay.
Yeah, hi, Russell from PHN. Sorry, I may have put my comment in the wrong section. I put it on GitHub instead of Confluence. But my only question on this was the date of the name to use, and whether that's something that I didn't think it needed an end date, because when you change the name to use the next time, then the start date of that change should be the end date for the previous. But my question was really around software implementation, which may be out of the scope of this conversation. Anyway,
no, I think it's,
yep.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good point, and I will, and I think we will go through that one in the session on the name to use proposal. I've just written that down.
Great,
so we'll
thanks,
make sure we go through that feedback and discuss. Yep, no problem. So if no one's intending to put any more feedback or review on the meeting minutes from the last meeting, then I'll ask if someone's happy to propose a motion to approve that.
I will.
Thanks, Denny LB. Do we have someone who's happy to second approval of the minutes?
I can.
Thanks, Elia. Now, what I'm going to do is introduce a radical shift in technology to how we approve the minutes. We've been asking people to use the reactions in Zoom, but we now have available to us a handy thing called Zoom polls. So I'm going to now trigger a poll for us to do that voting. I've lost the button for it. Well, that's very unhelpful.
Maybe when you turn recording on, it disappears.
No, I did this just before the Christmas break. And obviously how to do that has just gone from my memory entirely.
You often need to set it up in the meeting, the way that the meeting is set up. So it's probably in the background in Zoom.
And I have just failed at it. Otherwise, I think we'll have to go back to the old way of going through approvals and ask people to put their hand up with reactions. Yeah, I think we're going to have to do that, and I will make sure that I am better prepared in the next meeting, that I can actually trigger that poll that I know I created. Russell, you've got your hand up.
Only to just approve the minutes.
So what we'll ask for, we've got the list of participants here, then is if you want to abstain from approval of the minutes, if you can use the reactions on Zoom to raise your hand.
We've got a couple, so 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is for abstaining, not approving. Right.
So it looks like we've got 10 people who are choosing to abstain. We'll go with 10. And then I'll ask people who want to vote negative, so to not approve the meeting minutes.
That's no one.
Okay, then we'll take, based on the amount of people there, that 10. So that's 43 approve. Okay. Well, it's not a meeting without a technical snafu. So I'll come back into sharing. Okay, updates on the actions of the previous meeting. So we have 4, 2 of those were on me. The first one based out of the previous meeting, where we started to go through how to map AU-CDI into AU Core and into FHIR, and that discussion. We had a number of questions around, I think, the scope and application of some of the elements in AU-CDI. And we took that action to organise with Kylan Lloyd, who's one of the authors of AU-CDI, to organise a Q&A session with them. That's tomorrow. That should be in your calendar. If it's not, you can email me and I can forward that to you if you want it. So we've got the AU-CDI Q&A for implementers session organised tomorrow. The other action on me was to update the confluence material on the R1 proposal, where in the table there was a lighter yellow and a darker yellow colour, and I hadn't explained what that colouring scheme was, and I've added that note there. And the other 2 were from Heath, who has posted those 2 items on Zulip. There's a pretty interesting discussion going on allergy intolerance at the moment around the codes that we should be supporting on exchanging that in AU Core. And that's looking like we're getting closer to a change proposal for AU Core. So I do recommend people have a look at that. News and updates. We've got some new co-chairs. Sadly, Danielle Bancroft has left us, but Landon is coming in as a new co-chair from Best Practice. We also have Michael Draheim from Oracle. And so that sort of completes our current set for 2024 with Andrew, myself, Landon, Marvin, Michael and Tim from ACT Health. I don't think Tim's on the line today, but he'll be back next week. Right, so I'm going to run through an introduction to Sparked pretty quickly and really just give some of that high level for people who are new into Sparked, into coming into a technical design group. So Sparked is the National Australian Fire Accelerator. Sparked itself is a community, comprises government. We've got government on the line today in the technical design group. We've got the technology vendors, provider organisations, peak bodies, research organisations, domain experts coming together, and the focus of Sparked is to accelerate the creation and use of national fire standards. in the health exchange. So this is a partnership being set up with CSIRO, Department of Health, HL7 Australia, and the agency. So this is government initiated and funded, and it's working together in Australia, but also with the international groups. And everyone who's here today is therefore part of Sparked as well, part of the community. We've got some of the founding members here. This is taken from the Confluence site. More founding members get added as well. I just thought I'd put that up. And I've got some, I said that round earlier, but really I'm just putting out some faces here. So if you see any of us around or you want to contact someone, these are the faces. If you see us at a face-to-face meeting, if you see us at a connect-a-thon, chase us down if you've got questions, we'll help. Okay, scope. So Sparked is currently a 2-year work program. And on that work program, there are 2 projects. One is AU Core and one is AU e-requesting, which is under the AU e-requesting technical design group, which operates on off weeks from us. So this week is AU Core, next week is AU e-requesting. In scope of both of those projects is the data set for interoperability. So that's what I mean when I've been saying AU CDI. That's the Australian Core Data Set for Interoperability, and a FHIR IG, AU Core FHIR IG. Also looking at doing validation piloting of the FHIR standards, going through and having reference implementation testing service, and terminology is also packaged up in that. I'm going to bring this diagram back into play for this beginning of 2024, and where are we now? So it's an 18-month from starting the project proposal for a FHIR IG through to publication is the basic sort of time frame. So those numbers at the top of months. We're in the middle of development now for AU Core. So we have the project proposal that's been created, that's gone to the FHIR working group and the board who have approved it. We kicked off this development of AU Core in August in anger, going through this for an R1 of AU Core, and we're about halfway there. And that also means then we're coming up to where we want to move away from the rapid focus and development and move into refinement and testing on what we have, which is that validation piloting phase. So I won't talk about a lot today. We'll have an update on that in a later meeting. So that's starting in about March, and then we'll go into ballot of the standard for trial use. And that goes through that process and in a publication. Richard, you raise your hand.
So we're currently we're currently in block 8.
We're
Is that right?
At the beginning of month 6.
Oh, okay, we're at the beginning of block 6. Okay, yep.
Yeah, there's maybe the little cool down is a little too small.
No, I could see it. I just counted from the wrong month. I counted from July, not from a bit later.
So a little more detailed one, I included this in the pack just to break out what's coming up right now, is we are in this development and getting ready for piloting and validation, including synthetic testing, synthetic test data. And the idea is March is when we're going to do the ballot for comment. So we want to get to a stable base of what we think the AU Core R1 is, and then focus on the refinement of that in March. And there is a connect-a-thon in March as well. Well, that's a bit squished out. And I've got a slide on that later, but the March connect-a-thon, which is going to be announced pretty shortly from HL7AU, and we'll go through that then. So here's our milestones. AU CDI is going to release their draft for comment at the beginning of February. And we're also going to do a ballot for comment in March. AU CDI itself is going to be published in June as its release 1. And shortly after that, we are going to, in August, if we're ready, target that for ballot of the AU Core R1 release. The idea that we can then publish in January 2025. Now, these are yearly releases, both for AU CDI and AU Core. So there's some R2 milestones down there. Some of our discussion now is about saying, is this piece of work, is this something that we're doing for an R1 scope, or is this something that we need to move into the R2 roadmap? A quick run through then on how do we do our work. I've put up the draft terms of reference, and one of the things I want to highlight here is the mission is not to develop the AU Core FHIR. That's a project we're working on, but the mission for this group is about the requirements and the specifications to support interoperability among clinical and non-clinical systems. It's about the minimum expectations for recording, updating, searching, and retrieving core digital health and administrative information. The full draft terms of reference are on the Sparked AU Core homepage. And I just want to highlight here, this means that AU Core FHIR does not have to be the only piece of work, the only product that comes out of this. It is our first project and the major project we're working on, but the terms of reference are bigger than that. So how do we do our work? I guess first question is, have you joined? Just about everybody on the line that I saw and let in has. If you've received a getting started email, you will have joined. That's the confirmation that you have. There's a link there in the pre-meeting slide pack on how to register if you want to. The next point I really want to call out for people is chat.fhir.org, the Australian channel here. This is really important. This is where we have our community discussion forum. It's where we post questions. It's where we start and participate in community discussions, like I referenced earlier.
Our live shows. After clicking on TDG, fill in the required fields as desired.
Can you go on mute, Paul? Thank you. And we've got a fantastic discussion going on about refining the list of codes that should be supported in allergyintolerance.code. I'd strongly recommend that people have a look at that and participate in that. And then we'll bring through a change proposal into this group. It's also where we want to be posting announcements. There's been a lot of, I think, email heavy traffic, and I'd like us to be reducing that and using the announcements part of that forum instead of so many emails coming out. I might, if we have time later, talk about that through this group and see what if we can make a decision on that. The other thing we do as a group is we are continually refining AU Core. We're looking for specification feedback. So we're reviewing existing designs. There is a draft AU Core FHIR with content there that's proposed. At any time, people can be raising issues, providing specification feedback, whether that's because something is overly prescriptive, because something is missing, because it's ambiguous, because it is way too constrained, or we can improve something. At this point, we're using the AU Core GitHub to raise those, because that is what is available to us. And you'll see at the bottom of the IG itself, there'll be a propose a change button if you want to use that. But we will be moving to HL7 International JIRA very soon. I'm hoping that that will be in place by next week. They're working through that right now in international. So we'll put a notification and update some of the materials when we have that available. And I'd like to put that notification on chat.fhir.org instead of, I guess, emailing it out to the group. And the other thing we have is where we have relatively, where we're trying to build out proposals and ideas, there's a section in Confluence that we're building these out. You will have seen that if you looked through the name to use proposal. And you'll also find that for where there's some proposals being formed around the AU Core R1 scope, about where we're talking about the mapping of AU CDI. Anyone can kick off a proposal there and start building something out for AU Core R1 and put that there, and we can run through in feedback and bring that into the group. You don't need to be a co-chair to raise an issue. You don't need to be a co-chair to build a proposal or submit something that you think is what we should be moving the content of AU Core to. And if you're more technically minded and you want to help out, you can create a pull request on the GitHub itself. It's an open source managed repository, and we can accept that content in. And I also want to point out, we do a lot of our business through meetings, like the meeting we're having now. That is where a lot of basically our decisions are coming to. We have our asynchronous getting of feedback, working through proposals, and then we come together, usually in a meeting, most of them are the conference calls, to go through and do discussions and hopefully coming to a decision through what we call voting. And I realize we're running out of time here, so I'm going to move a bit quicker and also point out connectathons. They're great. We'll talk more about them in future, but that's where we get into some face-to-face testing and get everybody in a room, coming up in March. I don't think I'll particularly go through that too much, except to say fortnightly Zoom calls for the main technical design group ones. There are other meetings as well that you'll have invites to. Some of those are information sessions, some of the pre-consensus meetings where we're walking through in more detail issues that you should come along to if you're interested to participate. And we will have some face-to-face meetings. All our meeting minutes are about decisions, outcomes, and actions. That's really what we're capturing. And attendees are listed. We must list who our attendees are and who is participating in this, because this is a standards process. We need to understand where and how the community is participating in this, who is proposing things, who is making these decisions. So we have a meaningful record for governance. And lastly, let me just check that's the last one. Perfect. So what do we actually produce? Well, ideally, right now we're producing a FHIR IG. That's what we're producing. That includes terminology in it. That has capability statements. Think of those as the sets of rules on system behavior. Operations, search parameters, profiles, guidance, conformance requirements. And there's also going to be some synthetic data looking through in some of the test materials and reference FHIR servers coming pretty soon. We're going through some of that set up now in the back end. I hope to be able to talk to that in the next meeting. There is an intro to AU Core session coming up next week. We're running those monthly, which will go into a lot more detail around what are these things that are operations? What is a search parameter? What is a capability statement? And why do we even have them in AU Core? So I'd recommend that if you're either new to coming into AU Core or you want to get a bit more information about that, that you come along to one of those sessions. I've not actually sent out the invites for that yet to this group, but I'll make sure I do that this afternoon. You can come along if you're interested, but it's an optional session. And now I'm going to hand over to Ruben to take us through the proposal.
Thanks, Daniel, and hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about the proposal regarding the introduction of the Gender Harmony Name to Use data element, or NTU. And Danielle, can I rely on you to move the slide deck along as I go? Because I don't think I can do it.
Yes, that's fine. You can just tell me to
great.
Change slide.
Yep, next slide then, thanks. Right, so a bit of background to start with. Name to Use originated in the, I suppose, most recently in the Gender Harmony work in HL7 International. That's a cross-paradigm implementation guide to support gender identity and related data elements in all HL7 primary standards, them being V2, CDI, and FHIR. But in reality, this idea is nothing new and certainly is quite independent of gender identity in other fields. It's simply around the name a consumer or patient would like to be addressed by, which may not always align with their legal name or name on legal documents. The links are in the slide deck for the Gender Harmony project, as well as the data element and semantics as well. And the definition stated there is that it's a text attribute that provides the name that should be used when addressing or referencing the patient. That definition is a little bit narrow in that it's not strictly for the patient, as you'll soon see. It could be for anyone. Next slide. Thanks, Danielle. So in the Gender Harmony IG, the usage for this is that the information, the name to use, is usually provided by the patient, and depending on the standard applicable, it might be encoded with a person or patient name field with appropriate qualifier, and that certainly is the case in FHIR and some other specifications. But the key point is it's independent of any other name or name component. So it could be a nickname or a formal name as well. Multiple cardinalities are supported in the description of this in Gender Harmony, and it supports changes in desired name over time, such as names which change to align with the expression of gender identity. And thus a validity period and a comment to allow that can be captured along with the use of the name as well. Next slide. Thanks, Danielle. Right. So before I jump into how we exchange this in FHIR, can I just check if there are any questions just on the semantics of name to use from anyone?
How does it differ from preferred name?
Oh, it's the same.
Thank you.
For most intents and purposes, it's the same. They've just opted to call it name to use. Right, so in terms of exchanging into you in FHIR, so FHIR natively in the core standard has a human name data type, and within that is defined a use attribute, which is bound to a value set which supports a value of usual, and for FHIR, this is how name to use is implemented. From the FHIR spec, usual as a concept for use indicates that the name is known as conventional or the one you would normally use. And the core spec also provides a period attribute or data element, which can be used to indicate the period during which the name to use is valid. Now, one thing FHIR does not natively provide is a means to capture a comment. And this is actually something which I raised with the Gender Harmony project. And they indicated that at the time it was considered, but they opted to leave it out because it would require an extension on a data type, which for whatever reason they were not in favor of. But the leads are quite comfortable for feedback regarding this to be provided for future versions of either FHIR or Gender Harmony, or independently as a general comment extension. So for now, there's no way to capture the comment aspect of name to use along with the actual name to use. So any questions on exchange of name to use?
I've got one. So in AU Core, I haven't had a look at that in detail yet, but is it, are there other elements of the gender harmony concept coming into that? For example, identified gender. And the only reason
Yes.
I ask, good, because
So,
yep, go.
yeah, I was going to say, there's actually a proposal for that in AU base, which I just submitted yesterday, Russell, and I'll happily add a link to that in a moment. The plan is to include it in AU base first, and from there leverage it in AU core subsequent to further proposals. Thanks.
We'll hopefully walk through it, but just on the meetings we've got, there's gender identity and pronouns proposal scheduled, as well as looking at sex assigned at birth. I think they're the specific ones called out over the next month for us to consider in AU Core.
Thanks, Danielle. So if we can just go back to, the name to use. So so pretty straightforward in FHIR, fortunately, and I will go to the next slide. So this brings us to the proposal, and the details of this was kindly added by Danielle as issue 88 for AU Core, and the proposal is summarized as supporting name to use in AU Core patient, and assuming AU related person is going to be in scope for AU Core, that we also added there, or otherwise added to the backlog for AU related person. Implement support in AU Core via the name to use being a must support data element, and add the following guidance in a subsection labeled gender identity and related concepts. And that pretty much summarizes what I've just been stated. And the key thing is that name.period will not be a must support data element in this version of the profile. Now, yeah, it's probably a good moment for me to throw to Danielle to ask about one of the comments from Graham in the issue around must support applying to sub-elements of a particular element. I haven't been following all the discourse here, but
Yeah,
do we need to
I
still
might.
agree a position on that?
I think we do. That's part of this feedback. Can I ask Andrew, Aubrey, if you're happy to step in as chair for this part now? And because I've got some, I'd like to provide some feedback and talk through my position on that.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. And I think I've made you a co-host, so you should be able to, well, let me know if you're running into any issues. So there is some feedback on this. I've got one around what are the implications of putting must support on parts of a data element, and I think we've also got some feedback from other people. I'll take some time to talk through mine now. So let's navigate to. I think a couple of people have put their hands up as well. I don't want to cut them off if so I might stop sharing and see.
Philip, do you want to, what question do you have or statement?
Sure. So I had a quick question on the must support pieces. So I think it's a good idea to have this field, but what I'm concerned about with the must support is especially in the hospital areas, the PAS systems. Many of them, if I remember correctly, do not have a preferred name, and that's the source of truth for that. And so I guess I'm concerned about if the EMR systems that are getting the PAS data and it's a must support, they won't have the details from the admin clerks to pass on to other systems, or if you receive it from another system, showing it could then be inconsistent with the data that's coming from that PAS system. So that's where my head gets a little bit worried on the must support side, but having it there, I think is a very good concept.
So I'll just double check, David, is your comment about must support? If not, I'll also add mine to the must support, and we can just keep talking about the must support until we get to a closed position on that, and then move to your question.
Yeah, I guess mine was pretty much around that same idea, like the preferred name. Like you say, it's certainly nothing legal, right? It's and so when you say you must support it,
Well,
it sounds.
The proposal, and I guess that's interesting. The proposal is to put must support on this particular part of the human name data type, but at this stage, the proposal doesn't say that you shall support, I guess, the usual value. If we leave it at just putting must support on use, what we're saying is you need to, clicked on a thing, that means that you can handle that part of human name, and that would include handling any of the values you got.
Yep.
That your system would be able to cope with it and process the resource if you got a value of name and it happened to have anonymous in it, because at this point we've not restricted what those values are. I'll then point out the corollary without putting any constraints now, and my comment on the GitHub was I am very strongly in favor of constraining and being really clear on which bits of name do we support, because without constraining it now, we're not actually really, we've said, well, some parts of it are supported somehow, but we're not clear on what that is. And I would see being clear is our goal, and I'd like to see us get to that in R1 about which of the values can we support and which parts of human name do we support. And I think they'd be different for patient versus a practitioner. Any comments on that?
I'm just absorbing all that right now. Thanks.
I support your position as well, Danielle, and in particular that we try and bottom that out in R1, because it'll be so much harder to try and do it in later versions of AU Core.
So what that might look like, I've put up US Core. which puts must support on only two of the attributes. So you can still send use, you can send any part of human name, but what they're saying is systems have to support family and given. If we accept the name to use proposal and accept that what that triggers is us getting clearer about these, we would end up maybe with 3. I would see that could be something like having must support on use, where we say that a system is going to be able to handle being sent a human name if it has this kind of use information in it. And I would expect us to always see something about family in there and given. But I guess we can talk about that, about which parts do we really support, and maybe even use, I know we did send out the table for Encounter, which asks people to put in what do they actually support. I think that could be a good way for us to get to an understanding of what do systems do now. So I think that's kind of where we want to land.
Danielle, there's 2 questions in the chat. If you could take a look and also address those, please.
Yeah. I agree.
I can read them out for you.
So,
I was going to help you out and read them out, Dan. Sorry.
I'll go for it.
So the first one is there a minimum data set of fields that's mandatory as part of the FHIR patient data model? That's the first one.
There is not. FHIR doesn't allow emptiness. So you can't send a name and not have anything in there. But the human name data type itself, which will hopefully, there it is. That's what that looks like.
And then the second comment of that was, but there will be various versions and later versions could support more fields than the mandatory data set. Yes.
Ideally, what we would get to is what we want to get to in R1 as a starting position. I would really like us that we are clear in R1 about what do we all support about a patient name. I think that would be a really good outcome for AU Core R1. The alternative is that we don't get to. We just say something about name. We're not really sure which parts, maybe all the parts, maybe none of it. Well, at least one of the parts.
And then I think the other question, I'm hoping I didn't miss you cover this, is while must support, imagine the cardinality would, must support 1, imagine that cardinality would start with 0.
Yes. The proposal for, well, from use, the proposal, and I agree with what Ruben's put, is that stays as optional. Currently, for the different types, patient has a rule, just like US Core, that some part of that name, I think it's either family or text, is the current draft invariant, which I don't agree with. I think we should be supporting probably family, but I think we need to get that agreement on what shall always be, like at least one name should have a family name, I think.
Cool, that's all the questions.
Unless you're Prince or something.
No, there's a comment there about de-identified patients for clinical trials. And that's a good point. And that wouldn't conform to AU Core patient intentionally. AU Core patient is designed just like US Core patient is to service the need for identified patient. Doesn't mean you can't do bulk data extracts and those kinds of things, but it doesn't do those cases.
I would have thought alphanumerical though should have been fine, considering it's a string.
Yeah, it should be. You're right.
There's one more question. How would anonymous work for de-identified patients for adverse event reporting use case? So that would be similar to the clinical trials comment.
It would, then it wouldn't conform to AU Core patient. You would have your IG, which is saying this is how you satisfy an adverse event reporting use case. And if you were trying to say any information about patient, what are the rules around that, basically? We can't both have a meaningful set of rules that says this is how we can recognize a patient and that's some clinical safe. When I get a document, I can see enough information about a patient, and also have the same profile do the rules for a completely de-identified patient. I think they're 2 separate cases.
We also have some people with their hands raised. Russell, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks. Look, my comments are really around family, the concept of family name in human name. Without the use code, I don't see that would have a lot of value. For example, I can understand that somebody might have a maiden name that they prefer to use as their human name, but I can't think of any software packages that I know of that record that information currently in the context of preferred name. And the other one was period. I also think that that's something that if we don't really have a consistent kind of implementation recommendation on capturing the period, then it's going to be of no use. In fact, it could be detrimental to the concept of preferred name. For example, is it a field that you have to record along with preferred name to indicate when the person started using that name? Are people actually going to record it? And then what's the impact of, say, just taking that as a system date that when you recorded the preferred name, that doesn't actually represent the true start period, and therefore that information may not be useful at all.
I agree with you. I would not be proposing that name period is supported in AU Core. I don't think that's present in enough systems, and it's not ubiquitous and required for the use cases. So yeah, I wouldn't be proposing it.
I agree with that as well.
Which, let's be clear, that although that is part of the definition of name to use, sorry to bring that back to Ruben's proposal, only the use part of how it gets exchanged in FHIR is what Ruben is proposing gets supported in AU Core, not the period part. So that's consistent with that position.
The one thing I would put to this group, Daniel, is whether if there were two usual name values, that should we have a constraint that or a statement that requires that there be no overlapping periods if the names are different?
Well, you don't have to supply a period anyway, so that you might get two usuals without period.
Yep.
I don't know. We might have to go talk about that offline. I'd need to go dig through what FHIR's best practice is.
I think the right thing to do would be to say that if you have two usual names, that you have to provide period on both of them and they can't be overlapping, but that might be a bit onerous for this first version of AU Core.
Yeah. I don't think we can get that far. What I'd like
is
to do is to get further than just some part of human name. I think we need to get further than that. Sorry, Daniel.
I was going to say, I guess that's the outcome point, right? Is that R1 needs to be something that can be supported today, whether you like it or not. Not everyone can do it. I agree there is more issues outside of the PAS systems that were noted. There are a number of clinical systems that won't be able to support that in the short term. So we would lose the point of what R1 is. I think, yes, there is a long-term goal to make these things mandatory to support, but I don't think that we should push it too far. I think there needs to be a reasonable line of what is actually achievable in the next 12 months. So by December, what do we all think is actually capable for us to support today versus where we would all like to be? I think that's the point we have to keep coming back to, right?
Yeah. Agree.
I think Brett was next.
Right, yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'd just like to agree with that. Use is pretty important when you have multiple names. You definitely want to be able to distinguish between the name to use and any other official name that's in the record. So without it, I think it becomes problematic to have multiple names anyway, because you don't know the purpose really for why those names are there. So I think that was just to agree with inclusion of must support on name use. And I think for AU Core, just with the period discussion, I think primarily, initially to aim at just stating like the current instance, basically when you receive this, that this is current, and So I think if you list multiple usual names, I think you're saying both of these are current now. And I kind of think of that would be how it would work initially, probably, unless you were really into more sophisticated cases.
Thank you, Brett. Richard, you had your hand up next.
A couple of things. One, on the comment about people with single names like Prince. A while ago, there was an Australian standard in something or other which said if a person's got one name, then you pretend it's a family name. So that was, I can't remember where that was, but that was around a while ago and was used in a range of systems. The other one was around the must support on name use. It strikes me that perhaps one thing we've got is we want to be able to identify if I've got several names, which name is a usual name. And at the moment, it looks like, and for the other names, we don't care. And if that's actually what we've got, then in a sense, the requirement is be able to identify which names are usual names. Now, that can be done by saying we've got a must support on name use. And the way that caches out is things that only talk about particular values of name use without talking about the other values of name use. But maybe we want to require people to say more sophisticated things about names. And so that fits with Brett's idea that if I've got several names, I want to know something about them. So you'd better use name use more often. But yeah, it just strikes me that possibly the must support on name use that comes from Ruben's idea is simply be able to identify the usual name. And I'm not saying anything about the other names. That was all.
Okay. Heath.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So around usual names and multiple usual names, I think if I go back to ancient times around Indigenous contextual names, we probably need to make sure that we can allow more than one usual name. Unfortunately, we don't have a distinguisher that in FHIR at this point that enables us to distinguish those contexts where Indigenous names are relevant. But I think at this point, we just need to not constrain it to a single usual name within some period, that kind of thing. And I think there was we recently did some stuff around the name used for IHI lookups and stuff like that, or am I getting confused a bit?
Different topic.
Yeah, but I think we broadened that to name use in general, so that might be relevant to your point, Pete.
So that was an extension on name.
It's still under potential
It's still
discussion
under,
and design
it's still under
thoughts
discussion.
in the FHIR working group.
FHIR work group. Yeah.
But that was on a human name, wasn't it? That the extension, not on the identifier.
Yes, correct. I think so.
So yeah, that's cool. I was just trying to. Yes, they're related.
Yeah.
So cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Heath. David?
Yeah, good day. I guess as I'm listening to this conversation, the thing that pops into my mind is the idea that FHIR is a standard. It's not a rule, right? As you have a data requirement, you need the standard to be able to adapt to that requirement. It's not telling you what's valid or what's invalid, because that depends on the business requirement. So I'm a bit confused about FHIR is telling us a way to express the data requirement. Depends on what the data requirement is, though, is whether or not if I need to record 5 Indigenous usual names, then I need to do that. And FHIR should just be enabling me to do that, because who's ever receiving the FHIR message will be able to unpack it properly, I guess. So I guess I'm sort of wondering around trying to make sure that I'm clear about when are we expecting FHIR to be enforcing a business rule as opposed to be saying this is the approach that you go to when you want to exchange this kind of information.
And that's the discussion we're having. That's right. So FHIR itself just sets out the ways we could do it. We're discussing an AU core. What are we saying systems will support if they're doing those minimum operations that we define in AU core?
But
So from FHIR's
but
perspective, you might or might not handle a family name. From US core's perspective, you will be able to handle a family name because they've put this tag on it. And so we're getting to a clarity of understanding of what does system support? What can I reliably do with things? How can I reliably exchange information with you? And how do I reliably know that I'll get back? That's, I guess, what we're talking about.
Sure. But I guess what I'm seeing in the FHIR standard, though, its capabilities of providing things that we need. Are you trying to then enforce certain rules based on certain scenarios? Because I can write a new computer system today that can eat FHIR data, and I'll be, expecting I'll be getting different payloads than traditional practice management systems.
So I think the proposal under discussion is that in AU core, we agree that we'll be able to handle, and that's the proposal, that we will be able to handle name use. Other systems that aren't AU core or it currently might just ignore it, not process it, not particularly do anything with it. And we're saying the proposal here is that if you are a system that handles patient FHIR resources and it's an AU core patient FHIR resource, then we know that you'll be able to handle this.
Right. So it's the expectation based on the gotcha. Sorry, Daniel. Thanks. Makes sense.
I guess that's the proposal, is us getting further clearer around that expectation.
Yep. Thank you.
I think we just have 5 minutes. So Chris and then Ruben.
Oh, hey guys. So I support the concept of name use. I guess I'd want to draw people's attention to an Australian standard called the 4590, the interchange of client information that currently exists, that has a very similar code system in it, but with slightly different codes. And given that this is an Australian standard that's sort of supported broadly beyond just healthcare, and I think it's also supported by the Australian Institute of Health and Wellbeing as part of a series of our national minimum data sets, it might be worthwhile looking to see if we can better align some of the codes in name use with the codes in name usage type.
I'll respond to that one and say for name use, what might end up doing that is describing a relationship between them. We're limited in this particular case to FHIR's values because it's put a required binding on it. So these are the only values that we're allowed to have for it to be valid FHIR, basically. But we could certainly look at providing some mappings to what does that actually map to in the Australian standard.
That would be brilliant. Yeah, thanks.
I'll just go quickly because my comment is really following from Richard's one. The standard which recommends that the name is stored in family name and given name being left blank for individuals with a single word name and no other name is actually stands Australia AS 4846, person and provider identification in healthcare, which has that. Hard to believe that standard was published 10 years ago now, but start there.
So can I guess, do some, so it's looking like, I don't think we can, I'm not sure. Can we vote now? Is that what we're saying? Do we need to talk about this further on what does it mean that, can we move inside? Although it seems like we've got some really broad support for being clear on which parts of human name do we support, at least for a patient. Is that the case? Could maybe people put their hands up as reactions so that we can see that? I should stop sharing my screen so I can see that. Let me put my hand up.
Would you ask the question again, please?
Can I get people to raise their hand if they are interested in us putting must support on parts of human name? So being really clear about which bits of the human name data type we support. Like, is that family? Is it use? Is it given? And ask people to put their hand up in the chat, or sorry, in the reactions. Awesome. That's looking like that's climbing. That's 25 people and counting. So I think that's something that we should look at doing that. So that to me, I realize we're running into time. Sorry. That to me says that we can therefore consider this proposal on, do we put must support on name.use, basically. How we can do that is we can talk about another meeting, or we could also put this out for electronic vote, because the proposal there, and it's pretty clear about what it's saying, which is put name.use must support, and we could put that out for electronic vote. But what I'd also like to do is, like we did with Encounter, send out an email and get people to fill out the Confluence page on which parts of the FHIR name data type do they use, which values do they use, so we can then bring that in maybe in the next meeting and talk about what are the other, like, what do we actually set? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think doing it electronically would be a good idea.
All right. Let's go ahead with that. Other people have got their hands up, and yeah, we'll send out the email, and that lets people who weren't involved in this, and we can broadcast that out, start contributing into that one. And I also want to call out, there's a March Connectathon. We've got the dates now, 20 to 22nd, but there's no registration yet. So I'll put the announcement on chat.fire.org when it's there.
I think for people to vote, they'll need to have good clarity on what the must support constraint, the must support requirement winds up meaning in practice. Because I expect that we'll find some people who will be happy to support one use of must support and unhappy to support another use of must support. So the process has got to have that fairly clear, fairly early in the voting.
There's a nice information session from Andrew, who did the walkthrough of what that means in a video recording, and we do have the documentation in AU Core with the background then of that walkthrough of what does it really mean. And we can reference that when we send out the vote and put in, I guess, maybe some words.
Perfect.
I just want to check, Phil, I'm not sure if I understand your comment.
Yeah, so I guess where I'm thinking, and maybe just because not everybody has their names next to them, I haven't seen anybody, for example, that has represented the Medalist, IPM, WebPass, Hibiscus, and Queensland, those kinds of groups. And so that's where my challenge kind of comes into this discussion is, if you ask me from an Oracle perspective, can I handle different types of names? My answer is yes, I can, but I'm not the PAS for many of my clients. And so that's where my concern kind of came.
So I am one of your clients, Phil, in Queensland Health.
You are.
And
you are.
Our data standards do absolutely support a preferred name as different to other kinds of names. Now, granted, not every PAS system we use fully adopts that. But we are certainly in favor of this data element being mandated not only here, but also within our own data standards as well.
Fair point, but I guess my question is that do we, I guess, if we're accepting this, if we say we must handle these elements, do we accept that either the data is sitting isolated in clinical systems because the admin systems may or may not support, or that effectively we're forcing the admin systems to update to then also accept and capture that data to across the board? Because that's our problem, is our in my mind, the lowest common denominator essentially of what we're doing. What happens if the clinical system accepts it in, shows it to the clinician, gets additional details from the PAS system that doesn't know about that, and then is then out of sync because it came from another system?
So Phil, are you asking the question as to whether or not something like WebPAS would support this in a particular way? Because they certainly have the alias field and have other ways of identifying things, and I'm guessing they're more from an HL7 v2 perspective. So are we thinking, you know, can we support it from HL7 v2 perspective from some of the legacy systems? Is that what you're asking?
No, I guess what I'm saying here is, I guess first question is exactly what you've said, Marvin, of is there a technical capability in the product? So do we have that across every single product? And if we don't, are we going to enforce that in or accept the implication where that isn't there? So are we saying that, you know, because FHIR may be required in a clinical space, that then Ruben, I'll just take your name in vain a little bit, that Queensland Health must update their Hibiscus PAS system to capture those details and keep them essentially in sync? And is that technically possible? And are they then willing to do that change? Or are we willing to enforce that change as a byproduct of, in order to do FHIR, which I'm sure will have some carrots and sticks?
Hi, Phil. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, this is Julian
Hey,
here.
we have a Daedalus person. Thank you, Julian. Go for it.
I just thought I'll answer your question. So currently, the way the system works, like IPM and WebPass, we will capture preferred name, and we can capture multiples, and we do have the start dates and end dates if people really want to capture that. In reality, most people probably won't. Now, whatever we choose to do in FHIR, all right, now, the way Daedalus works is if a client says we need this and they'll pay for it, we'll do it. So technically we already capture it. We support it with HL7. So it's just basically if FHIR says we need a FHIR and someone's willing to, you know, pay for the enhancement, we'll do it.
Perfect. And that's the circle. So vendors can say we can do it. Daedalus can do it. Oracle can do it. I'm sure Epic can do it. I'm sure the practice management system can do it. Are we willing to put that requirement back on our respective clients to make that change? Which is essentially what we need to do to keep it safe if we make it a must support beyond some sort of official name. If our must support is you only have to have at least the name you're officially using, then theoretically almost every system should have some way that they're identifying the patient by name. But it's when you're requiring others or support of others where I get a little worried there.
I understand your concern there, Phil. It's a genuine one. But what I will say is that there's another way to think about this. There's actually a lot of ways to think about this, but the one that spring to mind is, you know, at some point, these large jurisdictions, ourselves, Queensland Health included, need to decide what kind of sacrifices they'd want to make and investments they want to make if they actually want to realize interoperability. If we base every decision on what we put on AU Core in terms of what everyone was willing to support and pay for, we'll have a very small and light specification. And I think we actually, part of what we're doing here needs to be to actually advance things as well to some extent. And the other argument is from a human rights perspective. Many governments, much bigger than their health systems, are actually putting human rights legislation in that requires this sort of thing to be very much front and center. So I don't think we're going to get a lot of resistance to your clients and the clients of other vendors actually wanting to adopt this already.
I think we've got a couple of hands up. I know we're over time, Danielle. So do we want to finish up those hands quickly? Bernie, I think if you can make it quick, you were next.
Okay, I'll make it quick. There was two things. One, I just want to come back from what you're just saying there, that Ruben, that I think we know the trouble that we've had, even, we've been through trying to get vendors in the industry to move to interoperability and to FHIR, or, even off HL7 version 2. It's going to, I agree with Philip, it's going, he can see the future. I think it's going to be a long journey to get them to, unless they're in the cloud, unless the solutions that they have are in the cloud. So I'm all for it, understand that it's necessary. My other point is I am not seeing where we have included consumers in, in even thinking about what is required. Now, I don't know, you're very committed to this, Ruben. Maybe you have seen there is data from consumers, but I just think we should have a consumer's voice here. That's all.
Thanks, Bernie. I'd probably just clarify, and I agree with Julian. The vendors in large part support this or are happy to do the work. It's the customers that rule our roadmaps. So we just need to remember that at the end of the day, if we want interoperability, it just has to be prioritized. Brett.
Oh yeah, I just on the must support ideas. It's I think if you have a clear support for the semantics of that name use, what we're asking you to do is actually just indicate that. If you don't have those clear semantics, you can't indicate that. So I think it's really just saying if you have clear understanding in your names in your systems that they mean it's an official name here or a preferred name here, you should indicate that. And it also then gives the opportunity for the client systems receiving it to be able to process that meaningfully and select the most appropriate name to go into onto the receiving side. So I think it's not saying you have to do all of these types, you have to even be able to indicate it if your systems can't do it. So I think it's that's worth noting.
Very practical.
Agreed. Okay, so coming to a close, we've got the AU CDI Q&A for implementers tomorrow. We've got the intro to AU Core, if you want to get into a bit more about what are we talking about, capability statements, all these kinds of things. Coming up, I'll send out the invite to that. Out of this meeting, we're going to send not just the meeting minutes, but it seems like we're going to send out an electronic vote for name to use, as well as creating that page and getting people to fill out what does system support now. And we'll move into trying to define then a position around what are the parts of human name that we do support in AU Core R1. That's my takeaway from this. Have I missed anything? Nope. Awesome. Then let's bring it to a close. Thanks, everyone. Pretty fantastic kickoff for January. Looking forward to more of getting down into the refinement and the nitty-gritty. Thanks, guys.
Right. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
All right, see you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.